Hello YouTubers. Well, I said I'd be back today and try to answer some of the requests I get from time to time here on the Mess About One channel. And I do get quite a few personal messages and sometimes requests to answer questions or even make a video of a certain kind. And I always enjoy reading my comments and my messages, and I try to answer, well, I answer most of my comments and I try to answer all of my messages. So if sometime you write and I don't get back to you, it's just, it's not intentional. It's an error on my part. Don't mind you writing me again if you want to and remind me that I haven't answered your request, because I do forget sometimes. And that's a good part of the things I enjoy here on YouTube is some of the personal contacts I've made. And I have people that have been watching me for 3 years, I guess, and still write and comment and make periodic messages and whatever, and I enjoy that. That's real good. I feel like I've made friends here on YouTube. I appreciate everybody that watches. And I had a message, I guess it's been 2 weeks ago, and I'm going to show it here on the screen. I hope if you ever write me and you don't want it, if you don't want your name or your message mentioned in one of my videos, please tell me don't do that, because I used to not do that at all, but I found that most people don't mind if I do that, and I think it adds to the answer sometimes when I include a message. So I'm going to put up on the screen here a message I got the other day, and I'll also go through and read it. And this may, if you don't like long videos, this video may draw out, so I'll give you a warning up front. Sometimes they get long-winded. Matter of fact, this person even requested a long video, if you can imagine asking for that. But anyway, it was from Chris. And Chris is Mess About One. Chris's YouTube name is Guitarit, and he's located down in Australia. He's been watching me for about 2 years, and he comments quite often, watches quite often. I consider him one of my good viewers. I have many of those that I appreciate very much. But anyway, Chris wrote me this message the other day, and I'll look down at the computer screen here and read it to you, and I'll also put it up. I'll kind of flash it up on the screen. And he said, "Hey, Mess About One, keep the videos coming." And I always like to hear things like that. It encourages me to do more. Said, "I'd love if you could create a nice long one talking about your life and your youth." Now, I've kind of done that in the past. If you want to go back and look at some of my old videos, you can see some of those things I did. But for Chris, I'm going to repeat some of that. And like I say, it may draw out long. Time gets away when I start talking on YouTube, so forgive me if it gets too long. YouTube's real generous about how long they'll let you talk now. Matter of fact, when I signed up, I think it was unlimited, and they kind of leave that. They grandfather you into some of those rules they had before. I think the new rule is 10 minutes, but mine can, I think, run longer than that because of my grandfather clause. Anyway, he said, "I'm at a crossroads in my life." And boy, we've all been there, haven't we? Everybody has that crossroad, Chris. And he said, "Where I've just finished a degree." He didn't say what degree was in something. "And I'm not sure what I want to do." And the old saying is, been there, done that. I think most of us have been in that same situation, Chris. I know I have. I'm 64 years old now. And believe it or not, I'm still not sure I know what I want to do. If that's any consolation to you, maybe that goes with the game of life. Is sometimes we don't really know. Now, I have had some people say that they have found exactly what they want to do and love what they want to do, and that's good. Some of us, I guess, always wonder if we've really found what we need to do or should do. And his last sentence was, "I notice you've worked in many professions, and I feel like you could shed some light on problems like this." Now, I don't know about that. I have worked at several things. I've had multiple interests on things. I guess my profession, well, I've had several professions too, as far as that goes. And I've always had a wide interest on different things. And I guess that does help be able to shed light, especially after living 64 years. I hope I could shed a little light on something after living that long. And he signed it, "Cheers, Chris." And I appreciate that, Chris. And I guess a good point to start is to kind of, like you said, start with my childhood and talk about some of the things important. I'm going to condense this. I'm going to try not to drag it out too far. And I do have some recommendations for you on maybe things to consider at a crossroads in your life. But as I said, I'm 64 years old. So that means I was born in about 1945. And as I've said on here many times, I've always lived in this part of Alabama, northeastern Alabama, which is rural, was very rural when I was born, and it's still semi-rural now. This little town here I live in is about 15,000 people. A lot of farmland, mountain land, country area around here. A lot of country people around here. So I'm still in a rural area. But luckily, I've always managed to make a living, and a pretty good living, without leaving my small town country atmosphere. I do work in one of the bigger cities nearby. It's a city called Huntsville, over about 40 miles to our west. Believe it or not, here in northeast Alabama, it's the space capital of the world. It's where the moon missiles, the moon rockets, the moon hardware and training took place before we put man on the moon. It's Marshall Space Flight Center. And there's an Army arsenal there called Redstone Arsenal. And over the years, it's developed into a high-tech area. There's a high-tech research park there in Huntsville. So I'm lucky that I can live in a rural area and still go into a not too large of a city and work in high-tech business. So that's one thing I guess to consider is, where you are determines a lot on what your opportunities are and what you can do. But anyway, I was born, I don't know if you could call it, you could call it in poverty. I'm not going to go back into the details, but if you'll go back, you'll find out that I was born not in a hospital. I was born in actually a log cabin. A log cabin that had no utilities, no electricity, no phone, no indoor plumbing, none of that. So I had a very meager beginning, but it was not unusual in those times after the Great Depression and after World War II for people in this area to not be in real good financial shape. Most of the people I grew up with grew up about like I did. There was work around, not high-paying work, and many people from this area decided to move north up around Chicago in that area to get work. But my family stayed here, and I'm glad they did, and made do with the jobs that were available here. So I had a very meager beginning. I for sure grew up as what you would call a poor boy. We had never heard for food to eat. We always had good food to eat, and we had fairly comfortable places to live in, but no luxuries. Even up to my high school years, we still had to make do with what was available. One thing, I had good parents. I had a very good mother and father, and that's real important to anybody, to have good parents. That puts you way ahead in the game, even if you're living in less than ideal conditions. If you have good parents, that's a big bonus, big plus. I was lucky with that. And I made fair grades through high school. I had interest. I guess one thing that has helped me is I had a variety of interest that came from way back in my youth. I was interested in many different things. Scientific things I was interested in early. I liked chemistry, and I liked to study about animals and plants and learn about those. And I just had a general wide interest. Got interested in electronics and radio, and learned quite a bit about electronics, and got into amateur radio and things like that. But I found through my life that all those things add up. If you have interest as you're growing up, a variety of interests, everything that you pursue, whether it's a hobby or interest of any kind, it adds to your mental ability, I think, and what your potential is later on. So I kind of added that in on my own because I had that interest, and I kept up with my studies. In school, didn't make great grades. I didn't really like school all that much. I had interest in things, but the studying part I didn't really like that much. I could have done much better in school, I guess, if I had better interest. But I did kind of have enough interest to know that I need to go on and take some mathematics and some science classes and things like that. So I took what mathematics was offered in my high school, and I took what science courses. I didn't take chemistry in high school, did take physics, but didn't take chemistry, and learned those things. And took, at that time, mathematics up through solid and geometry, trigonometry was about all you had in high school, very little calculus back in those days. And really, I had a variety of interests, and when I got out of high school, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I had in mind, at times thought about joining the military and going to the Navy and getting in the submarine corps. Why in the world I'd have done that, I don't know. But that was one interest that I kind of talked out of. I played football in high school and kind of had the thought I might want to be a teacher coach. And I got talked out of that by somebody that was a teacher, principal. He talked me out of that. And somebody along the way said, you ought to consider the engineering. And I didn't know an engineer in the family. I doubt I knew an engineer at all, but sounded pretty good. I said, engineers make pretty good money. So I said, well, okay, maybe I want to be an engineer. And my grades were good enough that I got up and could go off and go to the University of Alabama. Got in the University of Alabama, and I went into electrical engineering. And I guess that was due to my interest in radio and electronics and things like that. But after I got into studying the intricacies of electronic engineering, I didn't like it at all. I just didn't like it. Matter of fact, I didn't like engineering, but it still seemed like a good thing to do. So I kind of stuck it out in engineering. And in those days, I guess it's still that way, you had to take a kind of variety of basic courses, not just electrical engineering, but you took some mechanical things and some chemical things and things like that. It seems that I did better on the mechanical side than I did on the electronic and electrical side. So I kind of got off into interest in mechanical engineering. And I won't go into all the details, but I luckily got hired to work in the space program in the late 60s down in Huntsville, Alabama, when they were still planning to before they put men on the moon. I luckily got to work in the space program in a minor way, in a mechanical area. The job I had actually supported the test stands where they tested the large Saturn V rockets. They always put them on a test stand and fired them to make sure they were up to performance. And also part of the things we did was work on some of the barges that shipped those large stages down the Tennessee River out into the Gulf of Mexico and then around to, at that time called Cape Canaveral, where they did the launches. So I got to work on some of those barges. And a good experience. I learned a lot. And I got to be around some of the first engineers in my life. Of course, like I say, I was just a minor player there. And that was a good basis for what I did in the future. But still, I had other interests. I worked part-time at that time in radio stations. On my off hours, I'd work at radio stations because I still had an interest in electronics, always had an interest in radio. And I was a DJ for a while and a sportscaster for a while on the side while I was working at my full-time job, which was in the space program. I still worked part-time off doing things like that I enjoyed. All of it small time in the small town here, so no big time work, but still things that added to my knowledge and my ability. I was doing on the side while I was still learning about my main profession. So I guess that's one thing a person can do. If you're at that crossroads and don't really know what you want to do, primary number one is you've kind of got, unless you've got family that's going to keep you up, or maybe a mate that's going to keep you up. You have to have a job that has income to live at the standard that you want to live at. Now that's up to the individual person. I know some people that work at jobs they love, don't make a lot of money, and they adjust their lifestyle to live on the money they make, and they're perfectly happy. So I guess the first thing is you have to decide what kind of lifestyle that you want. If you're willing to live at the lifestyle of whatever you really want to do, then that's a different matter. But sometimes you have to maybe work at something you don't particularly love because you want the income that comes from that type of profession, even though it's not really what you might like to do. But a person could do like I do and work at the main job and have side jobs and things that you really have an interest in. So that's an option there for sure. Now, that's kind of what I've done my whole career. Sometimes, and there's parts of engineering I love and care about very much. There's parts of it that's not a whole lot of fun, if you know what I mean. So, and I guess all jobs are that way. You have some good parts, some bad parts. Maybe the good parts outweigh the bad parts is the ideal situation. Not always true. And I've known people that worked in jobs they just disliked terrible because they had a family they had to support. So they worked for most of the career in things they really had not rather do because there was good income in it. And that's another consideration. I don't know your situation. I'm assuming you're still a single guy. When you get a family involved, maybe a wife and especially children, then if you're the kind of man that I'd hope that a person would be, then you have to base your decisions on providing for your family and their needs, not necessarily your wants and needs. Although it'd be nice if those always went together, they don't always go together. So another life decision to make is if you want to pursue what you want to do, you don't want to disadvantage someone that you're married to or children that you have because you're doing what you want to do. And at least that's the way I look at it. So I've always done that. I've always tried to put family first, put myself second, and that's just the way I think a person ought to do it. Everybody may not see it that way. But anyway, that's a consideration also. If it's just you and you want to live on a lot lower income than what you could make in say a scientific profession, an engineering profession or something like that, then those are decisions you need to make. But first, you have to decide, I guess, what level, at what point you want to live and what to pursue. And I truly believe, and I bet it's the same way in Australia, it's that way here in America, in the United States. Even though I started out bottom of the line as far as backing future money, if a person really works at it, applies himself like he should, uses what intelligence he does have, then I think most people can be successful at what they pursue. And you do have a hard problem there in deciding what that's going to be. And I don't know that I can answer that for you. I'll give you these little hints from my own life, and maybe those will help some. But it's a hard thing to decide. And some of us still, I'm nearing retirement. And, I don't have a whole lot of regrets, although I look back and see things that I could have done different, maybe that I would have done better at. I think probably, if anything, is if I had applied myself even more than what I did, that I could have done more things than I did. Not that if I went back, I'd probably do that, but you always think that. So when you have the chance, if you're a single man, I would get all the education I could. I would learn all the different things I could. If you have some things you'd really like to do, like travel or different hobbies or pursuits, I think the time to do those is before you have a family instead of after you have a family that will change how you make your future plans, or hopefully do that. And I guess I'm rambling around here. I left off, I said working in the space program, and after that I worked in an aluminum reduction plant as a mechanical engineer. That plant finally closed down after about 12 years. I went back to Huntsville, Alabama, and started working. The space program was still there. NASA was still in Huntsville at that time. But I went back and started working in military support as a military support contractor, and got to work on a lot of the weapon systems that you see used by the U.S. military now, and I'm still in that field. I even got off and working in some, recently over the last 15 years, doing some work in mobile laser systems and things like that. Interesting work. I've learned a whole lot, and it pays quite well. And luckily I got in with an employee-owned company, and that company we earned shares in the company, and that company finally was sold to another company, and we got paid off for our shares in that employee-owned company. So that sets up a good retirement for me. But I guess the main thing is, even after you decide what you want to do, point yourself in a direction, is to kind of hold the course, to stay steady on it. Not saying, I read the other day that some people change jobs every 2 or 3 years now. Nothing wrong with that. But I guess you need to have kind of that long-term goal and try to apply your learning and your interest into something that adds to that long-term goal, if that makes sense. But what I found is anything I've ever done, if it was a hobby or studies or personal interest, whatever, kind of accumulates through the years and adds up to your ability to go into whatever kind of work or profession or job that you want. So I don't know if I've done a good job answering your question or not. Let's see, I've run on, oh boy, over 20 minutes here. And like I say, time flies when I get in front of this camera. So what I'll do, I'll divide this into 2 sections. You'll see part 1, part 2. And I feel like I've rambled on it, but that's a broad subject to to try to talk about your life and talk about your work life and your recommendation for somebody else's life. That's a pretty big request to put in a small video, and it's a hard one. It's a hard one. Maybe if you want to be more specific and ask other questions, I can go back and do a better job than I did in this thing. Anyway, Chris, I hope that's come close to answering your question. I'll try to edit this thing and see if I can get it uploaded and see how it looks. Thanks for asking, and I'll see you YouTubers later. Good night.